I'm happy to be here. We just, passed both the Holocaust Memorial Day and the Armenian Genocide Memorial Day, and this year they happen to be back to back, 23rd and 24th. As Greg was saying, Armenians and Jews have a lot in common. There's a lot of shared trauma and intersectionality, history. 6 or 7 years ago, I published an article called Jews, Armenians, Other Cousins. And the premise is that Armenians have always considered the Greeks and the French their cousins. French because toward the end of the Armenian Genocide, a group of Armenians who had survived and gone all the way to the Mediterranean were rescued by French ships. And Greeks because they accepted Armenians with open arms. And it's very similar cultures. So I made the case that Jews are the third cousins. Some of the most important, prominent people who brought attention to the Armenian Genocide and or tried to get it recognized have been Jews. Henry Morgenthau was the Jewish American ambassador to the Ottoman Empire during the genocide, who worked tirelessly to stop it. Franz Werfel was the Dutch Jew who wrote the most famous book about the Armenian Genocide, 40 Days of Musadag. And there was Raphael Lemkin, who coined the term genocide. And in his memoirs, he talks about first being inspired to find or create the term genocide after having read about the Armenian Genocide. And this goes on and on. Steven Spielberg in the 90s brought Armenian Genocide archives of USC into the Shoah Foundation, and so on and so forth. So there have been a lot of collaborations there. I don't take it for granted because some people may not know much about the Armenian Genocide. So I'm just going to give you some basics. Early 20th century, Armenia at the time, about 2/3 of it was occupied by the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire was just determined to get rid of all of its Turkic, non-Muslim minorities that lived there. And the result was that they wanted to get rid of Armenians. But it's important to remember, even though it's called the Armenian Genocide, and 1.5 million Armenians were massacred, there were 750,000 Assyrians also killed, about 20,000 Greeks, Yazdis, some Jews, and some Kurds, or Kurdish. Now some are surprised when I say Kurdish because a lot of Kurdish were let out of prisons during the genocide to kill the Armenians. So people think they couldn't possibly be victims, but what would happen is that the Ottoman Empire would turn around and kill the Kurdish when they were done. So this is what happened, and they systematically uprooted their minorities and started to basically take them to their death walk. And as a result, about 1.5 million Armenians were massacred, and another 500,000 that didn't die either went into hiding or fled. And of course, that's why we have Armenian communities on the East Coast. A lot of them came during that time and settled in New York, Massachusetts, Jersey, Connecticut, a lot in France, Greece, Australia, Argentina, Brazil. The Armenian diaspora actually is pretty close to Jewish diaspora in terms of like where they landed. So Armenians are slaughtered in their own ancestral homeland of millennia, and quickly after, of course, the Turkish state is born. And some people try to separate the Ottoman Empire from the Turkish state. It's the same thing. I mean, it's the same people, same culture, same mentality. I mean, their genocide now evolved into, they still had laws and systematic oppression of any minority that was left, but they started the cultural genocide of trying to, and they successfully did this, of getting rid of all Armenian presence of millennia from what's now Eastern Turkey or Anatolia. We're talking about churches and monasteries and convents and schools and cemeteries that are over 1,000 years old, just demolished and demolished, or turned them into mosques. And the campaign of denial, campaign of disinformation and propaganda to prevent the world from recognizing the genocide. And this has been a huge struggle for Armenians. Some of you know that the US for years didn't recognize the genocide. There was a lot of lobbying going on to prevent it. And it wasn't until November of 2019 when the House almost unanimously passed the Armenian Genocide Resolution Act. And then a month later in December, the Senate passed it unanimously. And then President Biden was the first president who publicly recognized genocide in 21. Ronald Reagan had said something about it unofficially in 81, but then he took it back. There was huge backlash. But guess what? Armenian genocide is not over. I know that's a surprise. The pan-Turkism, which is connecting all Turkic nations, from Turkey to Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Azerbaijan, that's alive and well. And the only nation, this tiny little nation as big as Rhode Island, stands in the way of pan-Turkism. And because I think the world's, the politics, geopolitics, petropolitics, and Turkey not really being held accountable for the Armenian genocide, what we saw was another chapter of the Armenian genocide in 2020 to 2023, which my documentary film was about. And Councilmember Koretz, it was a treat to see him here. He's in the film. I interviewed him for the film. It's about the Artsakh genocide, and if you don't know what that is, it's okay. Artsakh is more commonly known as Nagorno-Karabakh. It's the Soviet name that was given to it, half Turkic, half Russian. An integral part of Armenia that Stalin had so egregiously just put under the then territory of Azerbaijan's administrative control. But when the Soviet Union fell in 91, and all the different republics declared their independence, Azerbaijan would not accept that Artsakh declared its own independence even prior to them, and unleashed a war, which ended up in a ceasefire. But then in 2020, they had a military offensive, and in September of 2023, all of Armenians of Artsakh were pushed out. At that time, over 10,000 Armenians were massacred. That brought mercenaries from Syria, Libya, Pakistan to kill Armenians. Beheading an Armenian got you $2,000 a month and $100 bonuses if you could behead them alive and bring the head over. This is only a few years ago. This is not the Middle Ages. This is not, during barbarian times. And we are dealing with this now. There are about 3 million Armenians in Armenia and about 10 million in diaspora. It's 13 million, period. So we are dealing with Turkey, a nation of 80 million, that's a NATO nation. I don't know why, but they are. And Azerbaijan with 10 million, with supplying a lot of oil and gas to the world with unlimited resources in terms of being able to spend on what's called the Azerbaijan laundromat and caviar diplomacy. So, you all are familiar with defamation, disinformation, propaganda, all of that, and the pain. It's the trauma that people who have gone through a Holocaust or a genocide have to deal with when fictitious and twisted stories are put out there. As I said, US recognized it in 21. So far, about 34 nations have recognized the Armenian Genocide, including France, Canada, Switzerland, Greece, many other nations. It is unfortunate that Israel hasn't recognized it. I want to say I hope that changes, but we've said that before. Unfortunately, some in Israel have politicized it, sort of used it as a weapon against Erdogan whenever he gets out of line, and just his mouth just, well, you guys all know because he's been at it recently, but Israel Charney, who died not too long ago, wrote about this. Israel's denial is just really painful. And I'm just going to tell you, my radio show and my online publication are both called The Blunt Post, because I'm just direct. Even when I interview members of Congress, I ask really direct questions. Israel, unfortunately, also helped Azerbaijan and continues to do so in the Artsakh genocide with weapons and intelligence and, thank you, Greg. I guess my voice sounds bad. It's unfortunate. Politicizing things is unfortunate. Humanity should come first. But this is what we're dealing with. And now we're dealing with the erasure of Armenian presence in Artsakh. Some of the oldest buildings, monuments belonging to Armenians are at Artsakh, and one by one, we're watching this live. They're being demolished, they're being destroyed. They're taking off carvings on churches that have Armenian letters. They are turning them into mosques. I mean, this is happening now in real time, and it's just constant trauma that Armenians live in, But what can we do? We just have to go on and educate and talk about it. Talk about our shared traumas and the intersectionality. Earlier I was telling you about all the Jewish people who've brought attention and recognition to the Armenian Genocide. Ambassador Henry Morgenthal's story is no small. I mean, he was the most instrumental person during the Armenian Genocide, trying to stop it, getting the Wilson administration to do something. But also at the same time, some of you may know who Charles Aznavour was, who died a few years ago, famous French singer of Armenian descent. His family hid a lot of Jews in their house in France during the Holocaust. He was actually awarded a very prestigious award by Israel for doing that. So we've got to look at, we're in this together in terms of what we're dealing with, in terms of hate and bigotry and disinformation and propaganda against our people, and also not forget to include others, I think it's important to say that Assyrians were also massacred during the Armenian Genocide. It wasn't just Armenians and such, and it's happening all over the place. That's all I have. I know it was a very condensed history lesson of the Armenian Genocide, but I'm happy to talk to you afterward, or if you go to thebluntpost.com, you can learn more about not just the Armenian Genocide, but the Artsakh Genocide and related topics. Thank you.